No mai haere mai. Welcome to Climate Kōrero, brought to you by Climate Action Taiao, the podcast where we dive deep into the challenges, obstacles and perspectives shaping our changing climate. Join us as we explore how communities across Taiao, Aotearoa and beyond are adapting, growing and finding strength in the face of our changing climate. From local heroes to global movements, we kōrero with those on the front lines of sustainability, innovation and resilience. Whether you're a climate advocate or just curious about the world around you, there's a place for you in our conversation. So grab a cuppa, settle in, let's talk climate.
Welcome to Climate Kōrero. Today we have a very special guest, Andrea Booth, from the Mountains to Sea Conservation Trust. Kia ora, how are you?
Kia ora, I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming onto the podcast, and got a lot of topics that I'm keen to chat with you about and dive into what you do, your journey, how you, I guess, you know, from doc and all the jobs that you've had and how it led into working for Mountains to Sea. So a bit of whanaungatanga, if I could just get a little intro from you so the audience knows who we're talking to.
Sure, so kia ora tātou, ko Andrea Booth tāko ingoa. I live here in Whangarei and been working in conservation for maybe about 30, coming up to 30 years or so. So as I did a master's degree in ecology, working on seabirds actually, out on the Hen and Chicken Islands.
Oh,
so looking
at
the life cycle of the little shearwater, which is one of our smallest seabirds.
Whoa.
And then from there, started working for DOC in a technical advisory role, so working on threatened species programs. So predominantly terrestrial invertebrates actually, so the pupurangi, pupu harakeke, our giant land snails up here in Northland, as well as some other threatened invertebrates and some work on threatened fish as well. So my role was to support the operations teams in doing their threatened species work. Yeah. Then moved into a couple of management roles. I was the operations manager here in Whangarei office for a wee while, and then moved into systems improvement manager role. And then realised I was sort of getting a bit further away from my core love,
which
was ecology.
Yeah.
And was lucky enough to get a job with Reconnecting Northland, they're a charitable trust based here in Whangarei, but they work across Te Tokoro. They support groups with their mahi in terms of conservation in Te Taiao.
Yeah.
And that just made me realise how much I really loved working with groups to support them with what they wanted to do. As much as I loved working for DOC, it was a great organisation, I really wanted to go back to that sort of the coalface and working with the groups on the ground.
Yeah. You would have picked up some really good learnings from there as well, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then from there, this role came up with Mountains to Sea, which was purely working with supporting catchment groups with their river restoration programs. Yeah. So that's how I ended up where I am.
When you say catchment groups, are you talking about groups that are in the Kaipara catchment? What do you...
So it's the whole region. It's the whole of Northland.
Yeah.
So we... I'll tell you a little bit about the Wai Connection program.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Mountains to Sea Conservation Trust is an umbrella organisation which is national. They've been operating for over 20 years now. Within Mountains to Sea, there's a number of programs of work, one of which is Wai Connection, which is a program, another national program funded by Ministry for the Environment as part of the Essential Freshwater Fund.
Got it.
And so I'm the Northland Regional Manager for Wai Connection. So that program of work supports catchment groups who are wanting to restore their waterways. So we work right across the whole region. And then, so that's one aspect to Wai Connection, and then there's another aspect which is education. Mm-hmm. So you've probably heard of the Whitebait Connection program and the Experiencing Marine Reserves programs.
Yes.
So they've been around for many, many years, both developed by Mountains to Sea. And so my team delivers those programs within schools across the region. And then we also run events to, in conjunction with the groups, to engage communities, get people excited about their waterways, get people involved. And
cool. Awesome.
so that's Wai Connection in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Can't leave it out.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. What are the problems that you're facing? Because you came out to our property in Whakapara. And it's funny you mentioned those snails. We got a huge amount of those shells that we're finding while walking through the bush, and a lot of possums and stuff. But you checked out our waterways, and so I guess what are the problems that we face, and I guess what I'm searching for and hoping that the listeners pick up on as well is what can we do ourselves to clean it up, restore, regenerate? What are the options?
So I'll start with the key issues which are facing our waterways these days. So there's just been so much land modification. One of the key issues with waterways is the clearance of vegetation from around them. So that means you get erosion, bank erosion, increased sediment loads going into the river. And a really big issue is that the waterway is now exposed to the sun. So the things that live in our waterways don't like getting hot. So you've got the water totally exposed, you've got no cover for what's living in the waterway, and then the water is heating up as well. So it just makes it that much harder for things to survive. Fish and invertebrates and plants that live in the waterways to survive. You've also got, with that vegetation clearance, that means you get more runoff from the surrounding land.
Yeah.
And sediment's a really, really big issue. So you've probably heard about the sediment issues in the kaipara.
Yeah, I heard about the fish evolving. They're breathing and.
So it is. So sediment has a terrible, really massive impact on our waterways, on the fish, getting into their gills. It settles on the bottom of the waterway, just destroys everything.
Yeah.
So the invertebrates and the plants can't survive. The fish have got nothing to eat. So the kaipara is a really massive problem, which the kaipara moana remediation program is all about, reducing that sediment load. You also have issues with pollutants running off the land and into the water, so nitrates and phosphates and other pollutants. Because there's no vegetation protecting the waterways, you've got all those things just running off straight into the water.
Yep.
We've also got other issues like fish passage barriers. So our fish will migrate out to sea and at different stages of their life cycles, and then they come back in, and there's a massive culvert there. They can't get up. So in parts of Northland, there's whole areas where you aren't finding those fish communities that you'd expect to, because they can't get back up the waterway.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk a little bit about fish spawning areas as well in terms of climate change. So if you bring climate change into the mix, it just compounds all those issues just significantly.
Yeah.
So you imagine with these extreme weather events we're getting, massive downpours and flooding events. So that means you get way more of that sediment and pollutant runoff into the riverways, into the waterways than we have in the past.
Yeah.
There's also increased drought events. So that means that's going to be affecting the water levels. And we've got a lot of our fish species, all of our fish species, they spawn on the side of the river. So they spawn when the tide's up, when the water level's up, and then that recedes, and the eggs are left in the vegetation. So they're already so inanga, which are it's the main fish species in our whiteback catch actually. So lots of people are really interested in them. There's 6 species of native fish in the whiteback catch, but inanga make up most of the catch. So they spawn or lay their eggs right down in the lower reaches of the river, right down where the salt water comes in. Okay. So they're already at risk because a lot of those areas are pretty heavily farmed, and then their eggs are trampled by cows and so on. So you bring in climate change on top of that, increased flood events, eggs get washed away, increased droughts, the eggs are left high and dry, literally dry out and die. So climate change is really compounding what's already a very stressed ecosystem in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I see. And I guess there's a lot of, farming practices that have been carried out for decades and getting to, shift the mindset of, people that are doing those farming practices can be difficult too. I know, speaking to a few farmers, they've done it a particular way for a long time, and it's very difficult for them to shift how they operate. So I guess what are some, techniques, or what are some practices that we can do that are very simple and very effective?
Well, the number one thing that you can do is fence those waterways off so stock can't get in there, and then plant them.
Yeah.
So that's going to create a barrier to the runoff, sediment and pollutant runoff from the land, and also stabilise the banks, so reduce bank erosion, and over time, it takes a long time, but create shade for that waterway. And if that's done, the length of a catchment, it's going to significantly improve the water quality and the habitat for the biodiversity that lives in that waterway.
What's a good amount of space to fence off? Like 3 meters, 5 meters?
Yeah, 5 meters is a good distance.
Is there anything that can happen, like in terms of, I guess, because when you're fencing off 5 meters of grazing grass, that affects the farmer's income, so to speak. So what is there any kind of reward system? Like, what can we do to shift? Because that's a tricky one. You're affecting the income.
It's really hard. It's really hard, and it's and we know that a lot of the farmers in Northland are doing it pretty hard. They're not making a heap of money.
Yeah.
So to do those things, to pay for the cost of the restoration as well as retire that land, is a big ask.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother piece of work. I don't really want to go there.
Keen to know. I mean, yeah.
Talk to Amon about that one. He's got lots of ideas about alternatives and looking at retiring land and putting into carbon farming and all sorts of things.
Well, that's where I was heading. Like, we don't have to necessarily.
I'm no expert on that stuff.
Yeah. But it is exciting to know that you plant natives, that there is options for carbon credits and.
Yeah. I think it's still in development through MFE, and I don't know what's happening with the new government. I think that might have stalled a little bit. Yeah. Don't quote me on this because I don't really know much about it.
All good. So how is the Wai Connection supporting with catchment groups?
So we're currently working with 19 groups across Northland, and of those 11 are iwi, hapu or whānau-led groups.
Awesome. Which
is really different to other parts of the country. A lot of other parts of New Zealand, it's predominantly farmer-led groups, but they tend to have these big farms in other parts of the country with farm managers, and they're able to put that time into developing catchment groups. So quite a different dynamic up here in Northland. So what we've done is met with the groups and just understood what they actually need to be effective. So Wai Connection is all about building capacity and capability within our groups so that they become sustainable over time. Yep. They can just get out there and do everything on their own. They can generate or secure income funding to do their work. So how we support them is just a whole lot of different ways that we support them based on where they are. So It could be anything from, there's some groups who haven't even formed a formal group yet. So we're helping them to engage the neighbours, other landowners to look at actually forming a group. Then we'd work with them on establishing a formal entity so they can, a lot of the funding opportunities, you need to have a formal entity in
Like
order
a charitable status.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so to be able to receive funds, so we'd help them with that. We've got other groups that have been around for a wee while. They're a charitable trusts or some other form of entity. They've got lots of people interested. They've got lots of people on board, but they don't have a plan.
Right.
And it's just so important that they have a plan for what they want to do and how they're going to show that they're being effective. Funders really need that. They need to show that the group has a vision, and they can show how they're going to achieve that vision. So some groups were doing that, helping them form plans, and other groups are really interested in monitoring. So monitoring changes in the water quality. So we provide them with training on how to do that. We have a citizen science process training system, and we train them with that so they can go out and just do that monitoring themselves.
Awesome. That's a huge job.
It is. Yeah, but it's them who are doing all the hard work. So many of these groups, most of them are volunteers, or many of them are volunteers. Some of the groups are lucky enough to have, in particular, Te Mana Aotearoa funding, so they've got teams who are paid to do this work.
Oh, cool.
But many of the groups are volunteers, and I so really admire them. The number of people who are doing all this work as volunteers in their own time and just sticking at it, because it's hard and it takes a long time to get anywhere.
Yeah. And I was just imagining like a helicopter view of Northland. There's so many different aspects to it, different land. I mean, every group, I imagine, have their own set of needs and wants, and to be able to go in and identify all of that is a job in itself. With the, I guess the iwi and hapu groups, are they working alongside each other, or is it more, is it sort of isolated? Like, is there, I guess I'm thinking about sort of collaborative hapu and iwi. How are they communicating, successes and also failures?
There is a regional iwi hui focused on freshwater, which was held last year, and there's going to be another one this year, I'm not sure when, and they all came together and shared their stories and what they were doing and what was working and not working, etc.
Yeah, awesome.
So also in terms of that building that sustainability within groups, the biggest challenge all groups face is securing resourcing. So to pay their teams to do the work and to actually get the work done, either fencing and planting. So that's a massive challenge. So again, having a really good, robust plan so you can show funders this is what we are aiming to do and this is how we're going to achieve it is a really powerful tool. And it doesn't have to be a massive, big, thick document that sits on the shelf. A lot of people are kind of wary of plans. It could be 2 pages. It could be a short vision. This is what we want to achieve long term, and then some steps about how they're going to achieve it.
Yeah.
That's all it needs to be, and that's a really powerful tool.
And are there many funders that will cover like fencing? And because I mean, if it's a private property, like, so that's something that we purchased the property ourselves, but the setup of the property was a limited liability, and we purchased the property as a almost like a Airbnb type thing, but we wanted to fix up the waterways, so it was difficult for us to apply for anything as that entity. What are, I guess, the steps that you need to do, and what funding is out there for that?
So there's all sorts of different avenues, and I'd recommend people jump on their local regional council website and have a look. So Northern Regional Council has some options. Kaipara moana remediation, which you referred to earlier, the Kaipara catchment covers 1/3 of the Northland region.
That's
so
huge.
It's enormous. So they have a heap of options. They're really well resourced for the next 10 years. and but they don't fully fund fencing and planting. There needs to be a contribution by the landowner.
Yeah.
And the same with regional council. There's different funds. Most of them do require input from the landowner, either financially or work, in kind contribution. In the past, we were really lucky with Jobs for Nature. We had some fully funded projects, fencing and planting projects, which was pretty amazing. Pretty lucky to achieve that. So hopefully, in the future, that opportunity will come along again. But
cool.
there are all sorts of different funding organisations and avenues. So I'd encourage anyone interested, first of all, look at your regional council website, see what's available, and then start doing a bit of searching online for other funding opportunities.
Yeah. With the groups that you're working with, what are the, innovative ways that you're seeing, new techniques, new ways of adapting to the climate? Is there anything that's kind of standing out, or anything that's different that's happening? It's
pretty prescriptive.
Yeah.
This restoration. I mean, there could be, in terms of the restoration itself, it's pretty prescriptive. You fence and plant. There could be some innovative ways in terms of securing resources and ensuring sustainability of the group, but I can't see any. And you're going to cut that bit out, aren't you?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
Anything that doesn't work.
It's interesting, and this is off the record, but this is something that AMON was really big on, is looking for alternative ways for landowners to get income.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all about that. They're really, really big on that. How do we make it actually truly sustainable for landowners to be able to actually do this?
There's a few people searching for those answers at the moment, and that's really exciting because we should be rewarded for thinking outside of the box, or because you're not just fixing up your own property, you're actually preserving everyone. What are some of the key achievements with Wai restoration that you are seeing?
So, starting to build sustainability within groups, so helping those groups to start secure funding and get really good at that. A lot of funders are keen to keep funding groups that they see as successful. So if we can support them to write really good plans and start building a relationship with funders and start securing funds, that's a really, really good start to becoming sustainable.
Yeah. And I guess people have such good intentions, and they just throw themselves at it. I'm well aware of what that looks like.
The other thing we're seeing is groups who are doing freshwater quality monitoring and doing that really well.
Yep. Then
they can show what they're doing is making a difference.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a lot of situations they're showing a recurring poor water quality, but down the track, once we start to get more restoration done, that will start to show improvements in water quality, which is really good to feed back to the general community, to get other people on board, but also to funders to show, hey, look, what we're doing is making a difference.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we had Greer and Nick come out and work with some of the young people that we work with within nature. But I was quite amazed at how a lot of the young people hadn't experienced any of that, and it wasn't even really in their awareness until that happened. So I guess how do we, as kaitiaki, engage more people? How do you get the word out and raise that awareness?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and that's a challenge some of our groups are really finding. They'd really love to set up a big catchment group with lots of landowners throughout the catchment, but it's how to engage others. And we're finding a lot of the landowners, we've been speaking to a lot of farmers as we get around the place, and they just don't have the capacity to do this work.
Yeah.
A lot of Northland farmers are doing it pretty hard and they don't have that capacity. There's quite an opportunity there, I think, with sort of lifestyle block owners and so on, others who do have a bit more capacity, but they tend to have quite small blocks of land. So we've been talking to some groups about potentially holding some community events or even just community meetings to bring people together to just gauge, are they interested in doing something together?
Yep.
And if so, what might they be able to bring to the table? I think a key with these catchment groups, key to success is having one or two people who can lead it and really get things moving. They can organise the hui, they can do the funding applications, they can write the plans. So if a group's able to find that those one or two really keen people who've got the time, because it all comes down to time, then that's a really good start to getting a group off the ground.
But I guess that is a request from a lot of the groups you're working with.
We can certainly help do that through Wai Connection, but we can't do it for way into the future.
Yeah.
So we can support groups, we can train them up with skills for like facilitating group hui, writing plans. We've recently had some training to support groups with fund grant seeking.
Yep.
So finding funding opportunities and writing good grant applications. So we're sort of providing that training and support at the start, but the groups would need to then take over and do that themselves into the future.
Yeah, awesome. That's a huge help. So as a landowner, say if I wanted to monitor the waterways that's on my property, what kind of training do you give the landowners, and what sort of what do I do to monitor the water, going forward?
So the scope of our program, the Wai Connection program, is to support catchment groups. So we don't support individual landowners. We're not in a position to be able to do that. We need to support a group that consists of multiple landowners or community group members. They're not always landowners, it could be community group members or so on. So once we have a group in place, then we can provide them training. It's a 2-day training session showing them how to monitor all different aspects of the water, from what's living in the water, so being able to identify the macroinvertebrates, which are big bugs that live in the water, and through to how to monitor nitrates, phosphates, temperature, clarity, a whole range of aspects that then once you monitor those regularly, that starts to tell a story about the state of your waterway.
Okay.
It's a bit of a price. We won't talk about the price. Actually, we provide the training as part of Wai Connection as part of our program, so there's no cost to the groups. But the kit, the actual material, the kit that they use to do the monitoring comes at a cost, and also the groups would need to commit their time, preferably say monthly, 1 day a month to do the monitoring.
Okay. And from that, you can identify what is in the water. So say if your stream comes from a dairy farm or whatever, you can identify what chemicals or runoff or whatever's in that?
You can identify nitrate and phosphate levels as well as sediment levels.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And look at changes in those over time, but then obviously they're also influenced by other things like rainfall and drought and other factors. Yeah. That's why it's important to monitor as frequently as possible, because you get a lot of variation day to day, week to week from other factors as well. Yeah, because I read in the Herald the other day about aluminium being found in the fish in Dargaville somewhere. Yeah. About that. Yeah. I guess to be able to identify things and trace where it's coming from. So say if it's happening on your property but the neighbours it's not, then something's happening in between. So
Yeah, it'd be good to figure that out.
Yeah. But we do know, if you fence and plant your waterways, you've gone a long way towards mitigating those issues, those effects.
Yeah. Are there other organisations that you're partnering with that are doing, not the work that you guys are doing, but other forms of restoration or other forms of teaching groups?
There's so many groups in Northland doing this sort of work. So we're working really closely with Northland Regional Council. They've got team members doing quite similar work to us, as well as Department of Conservation, New Zealand Landcare Trust. We're the only ones that provide the water monitoring training, but those other organisations and groups also provide general support to groups, catchment groups. So we are being really careful to work together to ensure that there's not double up. We're not going... we're making the most of our limited resources, and so we meet and discuss who's doing what, where are the gaps, and who might fill those gaps from the different groups or organisations.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, there seems to be a big push in terms of consortiums and people wanting to be part of a wider group to make things happen. Food Kai sovereignty is a big topic at the moment. But there are groups that are just wanting to make a difference and wanting to make a change, but then lacking the capacity to go any further.
I think you just can't stress enough how important that collaboration is, because it's a big challenge. Just the working together is the only way we're really going to make some headway. Yeah.
Were there any sort of observations that you made with Cyclone Gabrielle? Like, were there big, new problems that came from that?
So that actually happened before I started. But so I've been hearing, massive issues with sediment loads, sediment being deposited on stream banks, completely destroying fish spawning areas. Just trying to think of some others. It would have really increased sediment loads within waterways and on, stream beds.
Yeah.
Stream erosion, whole lot of issues.
Yeah. I guess where we are, because we're in a valley, the mountainsides, the water just carved it up. It was fascinating and frightening to watch, What started off as a small little stream ended up really carving some deep sort of cuts into the land. We had a bit of sediment that, went into a catchment, and then it was just like, we got to get that out of there. But it had already happened, so and trees coming down and then blocking the path, and it was pretty brutal.
Because I've heard that once sediment's in a system, it can stay in there for decades and decades. We don't know how long it can, before it can, the system, even if you restore the system, completely replant it, regenerate it, the sediment can still be sitting in there for a long, long time.
Really? I was amazed, because I didn't know those facts about the longfin tuna and how they go out to the Pacific Trench in Tonga once in their lifetime to mate. And sometimes it can be up to 120 years before they actually leave. So, one person takes that tuna out, you've affected a whole life cycle for possibly hundreds of tuna. It's what you don't know, It's pretty phenomenal.
So some of those big tuna you see in those rivers are old, really old.
I guess I'm kind of sitting here as a person that runs a youth organisation, as well as someone who owns property. I really care about the land and the waterways, and I've noticed what's we know what previously happened on our property. We know what we can do, and it's a huge amount of effort. You know, I guess I'm exploring at the moment, you know, carbon credits. I'm also exploring, can we retire pieces of land just to go back to native bush? How do we fence things off so cattle can't get into it? But it is such a huge task that it can be overwhelming. Is there anything that Mountains to Sea does have resources or
So we're not resourced to do the actual work on the ground, the fencing and planting. The whole focus of Wai Connection is to support groups to do that work themselves, or to secure those resources. There's real power in landowners coming together to form a group. They can then show, rather than, you know, just focusing on one property, their focus is multiple properties, you know, potentially landscape scale project, and that's quite powerful to be able to show funders and so on that there's a lot of us here wanting to restore this big area. It might be that you can only get funding for little bits at a time, but you can still show we're actually working together as a community to do this together. It shows that collaboration, funders love collaboration. You being able to show collaboration, and also shows that we're in it for the long term as a community to restore this sort of significant area rather than just little pieces on individual farms.
Gotcha.
So that's I would suggest really trying to find a way to work together as a community. If you're struggling as a landowner to do it yourselves, just try and think of how you might be able to do that as a community. And then you can also share the load. It's a lot of work. It's hard work doing all those different pieces, getting an entity in place, getting funding applications out there, organising the work. All of those things take a lot of time. If you've got a group of people doing that together, you can share that load of that work.
Doing good costs money.
Yeah, it does. And it can be really overwhelming, you know, if you've got a lot of stream, you know, river waterway in your land, and you look at it as a whole and you think, oh, that's overwhelming, it's too hard. Maybe just take a step back and just break it down into chunks. Start at the top. We start at the top if you can. And work down over time. It's long. This long-term river restoration is a really, really long-term vision and proposal.
We were I guess grateful to have the support from Kaipara Moana to restore our waterways. Man, it was a mission. It was such a mission.
Why was it a mission?
I guess everyone had good intentions, and you had a huge amount of plants that turned up at once. And then the challenges that we faced was that engagement and people being keen to help out. That, you know, it slowly dropped off. So it ended up being my partner and I that finished the job, which was like 2/3 of the planting. It's hard work. And that wasn't even the hard part. It was like, then it's maintaining, what's it called? Releasing the plants keeping the kaikuyu away.
So what we've been doing in some parts of Northland is actually working with schools. So the Wai Connection school program, a requirement of that program is for the class to do an action. And for a lot of schools, the action is planting days. So then we can connect in with other projects who need some support with planting. Get the kids to do the planting. Or the wider community. Also bring in the wider community, you know, put on a sausage sizzle, whatever.
Cool.
And have people coming together. Because it's pretty soul destroying looking out there and you've got 1,000 plants to plant on your own. That's pretty hard work. It was daunting.
And summer was approaching. And we've got to get those out of those trays. how can groups get in touch? How can they find out more? Like, so what is your website? What is your, I guess, social media platforms? And what can the listeners do to, I guess, get in touch?
So just have a look on our website. So Wai Connection, WAI Connection, just one word, and that lists all of the regional coordinators around the country.
Cool.
And with their phone numbers and email details, so you can contact us through there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Andrea, appreciate the kōrero. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your stories. It was really awesome to hear that groups are getting together to make a change, make a difference. If you've got any sort of things coming up, please do let us know so we can share it on our platforms. Very keen and interested to see what Mountains to See and Wai Connection is up to. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.